Live now.
Okay, welcome to the Node.js Community Technical Steering Committee meeting for December 6, 2017. We'll be following our standard agenda. The first thing on the agenda is if anybody has any announcements they want to share with the rest of the team. Okay, doesn't sound like there is, so we'll move on to the next entries, which are issues extracted using the TSC agenda label across the different repos. The first one is number 16170, which is enable.m.js intent for ESM. So let's see, I think
I added that to the agenda, I'm pretty sure. Basically, we've been asked to provide a clear statement on what is negotiable and what is not with the modules implementation, and Miles has been working on that doc, so maybe I should let him talk. I see you're taking notes, Michael. I thought.
Well, I'm trying as long as I'm not too clickily loud. So.
Okay. Yeah, you're doing great. Okay.
Okay. I'll continue to try and explain them.
Go ahead,
I think we're ready to drop this issue off the agenda. The write-up is ready to go. It has been brought up to the marketing team and will be going out most likely next Tuesday on the official Node.js Medium. There's the Google Doc that's been shared with everyone. Please feel free to review it one more time. I've done a couple more tweaks specifically around like I made a slightly, like a personal intro to it that had a little bit more context for people. That was a request of the marketing team. Take a look, but right now it's scheduled to go out next Tuesday. And, I also had a phone call with the person who opened that issue and reviewed the text of that communication, and they were very happy with the outcome of it. So I think overall this should, allow us to close that issue and not have this on the TSC's ongoing agenda for a while.
Okay, so should I just go ahead and remove it from the agenda now?
I think that we're safe to do so.
I already removed the label from the issue.
Excellent. Okay.
And then once the communication goes out, I'll check with the person who opened it, but I think we'll be safe to close that issue.
Okay, sounds good. Okay, so any other discussion on that issue, or it sounds like we can move on?
I think we can move on.
Okay, the next issue on the agenda is 15608, which is buffer, runtime deprecate buffer num by default.
And so this one was an alternative to proposing deprecating the buffer constructor. It was sort of like a phased approach. They were going to deprecate the format that just takes a number. If you send and the question for the TSC on this one is that even like an option that's going to happen? Like, are we going to, I mean, obviously no runtime deprecation is a possibility. Runtime deprecating the buffer constructor is a possibility, but is this phased approach a possibility? And judging from the only people who weighed in last time I looked were Anna and Nikita, and they both seemed to express the opinion that it really wasn't a viable option. And so unless someone else here today feels differently, I'm inclined to ask that we just make that the answer. I see Miles left a comment there.
Yeah, I was just requesting that if we wanted to examine it further to run it through SitGem, but I, for one, want to echo Anna's sentiment. I understand the drive to want to clean up our APIs and stuff, but this has a high likelihood of ecosystem breakage, and I don't really see the benefit to doing it since it's not necessarily in line with the original vulnerability.
All right, so unless someone else has something to add, I'm inclined to remove the TSC agenda label, and I'll type up a comment basically summarizing my understanding of the consensus of the group, at least. If it's not the sentiment of everybody, it's certainly nobody seems to be offering a counterpoint. And then we'll go from there. Does anybody have any strong feels about this issue? All right, then I'm going to go off right now and do what I just said I'd do.
Excellent. Okay, so let's move on to the next issue, which is 17156. This is events add off alias to remove listener. Is somebody going to speak up as the one who added it to the agenda? In parallel, I'm looking for that, but
I am one of the two people that said that was against the change.
Who else was against it?
Let me get the number, the name of the other person. I am very bad at names.
Yeah, I don't really like this, but it's come up so many times that it's like people really want it.
Yes, more or less. The name is V. Kurchatkin on GitHub. That's the handle.
Vladimir. Yeah.
Vladimir. Yeah.
So how firmly against it are you, Matteo? Like, how firmly against it are you?
I am against it being Semver minor. Very, very against that.
So, Matteo, if it were to be Semver major, would you be in support of it?
I am with events Semver major. I am less. Let me say, I think it's a very bad idea to add it anyway. But given there is so much demand for it, I'm fine. Whatever. Okay. My strong -1, it says whatever. Okay. To some extent.
Why is that? What's I didn't see that in there. What's wrong with it being Semver minor?
It's a 3-letter character that we are adding it at every to every object, more or less, that we use from Node Core in the ecosystem.
Yeah, I see what you mean. Okay, yeah. So it really is a breaking change because we could break people's prototypes. Yeah.
For me, it's like or if you want to do Semver minor, but don't backport it to 8 and 6. So, which is more or less very similar to this.
I recall a few years ago, I tried to add a property that was an underscore property, and that was, for some reason, being used by the community, that it caused breaking changes and needed to be reverted. Like, adding stuff to the event emitter cannot be done lightly.
Yeah. We had the same kind of issues when we added prepend listener. The fact that that there were event emitter implementations out there that actually do not extend from the event emitter base class is another consideration. Those won't automatically inherit the new method.
So I think we're having we have not framed this issue, and so we're kind of just talking about it, summarizing it, which is cool and everything. But does anybody know, like, is this put on the agenda because people want a decision, yes or no, on this, or is there a specific question we're supposed to be answering, or what exactly is the purpose of this conversation? Does anybody know?
I think the purpose of the conversation was that it was clear we were not going to reach consensus inside of the issue. Matteo, the issue is getting heated. Matteo was also leaving for 2 weeks and was the member of the TSC who didn't want to see it move forward. So I think that we were pushing it to the TSC to see if the TSC would be able to reach consensus outside of the issue, to see if it was something we wanted to move forward, or alternatively, if there wasn't, a future for it.
So who put this on the agenda? Was it you, Miles? Yeah, it looks like it was you. So, I mean, if it seems like the issues are laid out pretty thoroughly in that discussion, the pros and cons, and there's not a whole lot of, I think people understand each other's concerns and motivations. So I kind of wonder if the thing to do is just, maybe we can talk about it a little more here, but just basically have a vote.
I think, like, before we move directly to a vote, Matteo, would you be open to landing this Semver minor on 9 with, like, an explicit thing that we do not plan to move it to 8 unless it's there for an extended period of time without any problems?
No, I think, and I would call it never ever, but yeah, more or less, yes.
I'm with Matteo. I think we should not introduce breaking, we should not break stuff for people just to have a more convenient method.
So the only pushback that I would put on that is that I would imagine 9 times out of 10 that if we broke anything with this, we'd be breaking people like legitimately trying to create this exact same behavior. And if it's only on the prototype, it can be overwritten. So I've still, like, James, did you find examples that would actually break if this was added, or is it mostly a theoretical thing that things would break right now?
Not in terms of modules that have implemented their own auth method. There are cases that would break, non-theoretical cases that would break, if someone attempted to use auth on an event emitter that does not extend from the event emitter class, and there are a handful of those.
Okay, yeah. What else? One example, I was playing with my Raspberry Pi, and I extended from event emitter, and I added the off so I could turn off my teeny little LED on my Raspberry Pi, which has nothing to do with the off on the event emitter.
But if you extended that on the object already, wouldn't this like be a no op for you?
But if any inherited, I would override an existing method on it, right?
Yeah.
But then if anybody used my library or any internal, like anything
If your
internal to
dependencies
that,
changes to use the new behavior, you'll break it.
yes.
Mm-hmm.
So there's viable uses of the word off that have nothing to do with actually removing an event emitter. And then you break everything that tries to use that instance that expects off to remove an event emitter.
So then it seems. So I guess the only thing that I'll ask then would be, if we were going to do this and do it semver major, is that something that we would want landing on 10, or are we actually better off landing it as semver minor on 9, seeing if there's ecosystem breakages, and if so, reverting it before it ever gets to 10?
We can do that by landing it in.
We can revert in 10. I don't think there's a hurry for this. There's really not a hurry. And if we do it early in 10, like at the beginning of 10, we can revert it later on if we figure out that there's.
And if you really don't want it to end up in an even numbered release, then delay till 11. I mean, it's not that urgent. It's very nice to have it, but I mean, some people think it's very nice to have it, obviously.
Yeah, once the commit goes into master, then we can dismiss any other issues that come up saying we want this in Node. It's coming.
We just keep it in
By
master
the way,
forever?
I'm fine if it's on do not land on 8. I am good with landing on 9.
I'd still prefer to keep it as a semver major and land it on 10.
Yeah, that's a very good. That will be my second favorite option, more or less. While the first one will be not landing it, but that's my personal feeling. Which I see, but I see the rest of the world. A lot of other people care about this, so I'm like, okay, well, perfect.
To be clear, I am definitely -1 on landing on. It's not like a preference. I don't want to see that happen.
You're -1 landing it at all.
On 9.
Oh,
I'm fine with landing it and delivering it on 10.
Yeah, I think that'd be my preference too.
So do you think we can kick back to that issue and just say that the TSC has consensus that we would like to see this land as semver major? And just like, I guess the one question then would be, we have one collaborator who is still -1 on it. Should we talk to them first, or just, that's kind of the result of this conversation?
No, I think you're right. We should push back to the issue. Say this is what the TSC at the meeting agreed. This is what we'd like to see happen, but there's still opportunities to object to it landing at all. Basically, we're choosing a conservative path here. It will land if nobody objects.
Yeah, see, the thing with that is, I don't know if I'm too cool with this. It's the only real point that I can see of this is landing an alias to say, yay, we landed an alias in core, because it really does nothing else. And by the sounds of it, it's gonna break the people who actually want it that are already doing it.
I don't agree with that.
A lot of the people that argued in favor of it are people that already have implementations of auth in their code, and they have asserted that this will not break them because their version is basically doing exactly the same thing that this would be doing. What we have not heard from, I mean, Trevor's comment that he has an implementation of auth that has nothing to do with this. Those are the kind of people we need to be worried about. The people that are arguing in favor of it are saying it will not break them.
So if there seems to be agreement that it should land, if it lands, it should land Semver Major. Why don't we send it back to GitHub, change the label to Semver Major, leave a comment to that effect, and that we're letting the discussion happen, for another week. Maybe leave the TSC review label on there, and if there's not resolution, yes or no, after 7 days, the TSC can take it up again and decide whether it should land at all. Does that seem like a reasonable path forward?
Well, Jeremiah, I see that you just put in a request changes on it, the big red X. Is that a firm -1? Because if it is, then we might, is it firm -1 on it landing at all? Because if it is, then we can say right now we're probably not going to get resolution on GitHub unless we deal with Jeremiah's.
But that's fine. Let the conversation happen in GitHub. That's okay. We can wait 7 days. There's not a rush here.
Yeah, I'd rather discuss on GitHub for now too.
Okay.
So, but we're all in agreement that if it lands, it should be Semver Major, or is there still a faction arguing for that it's not, that it should land in 9?
I think we have consensus on it being Semver Major, if it lands at all.
Okay, I was waiting for Miles or Mateo to say otherwise.
I updated the label, and I'll put an update into the issue.
The other thing to keep in mind is that this PR was opened by a brand new contributor, and so just on some of the messaging, try to be a bit more sensitive with regards to that. Person had never contributed to core before.
I mean, that's unfortunate, but if you contribute a tricky issue, then
Oh yeah. There's no getting around that. It's just just on the messaging.
Okay, so I think we can move on. We've, if anybody disagrees with the notes I've taken, and I guess Miles has the action to put a summary comment from the discussion in this meeting in the issue. Is that correct?
Yes, that sounds right to me.
Okay.
Sounds good to me. I'm just about done updating.
Okay. Okay, so on to the next issue. The next issue is add remark dependencies. This is 17320. Just pulling that one up.
Also, one Miles added.
Miles, yeah, you opened the issue, I guess, and so you might as well give us a background.
So when Remark was added to the repo, it was decided to not land the NPM dependencies, the node modules folder for it, as it added close to 2,000 new files to the tree, and specifically Refac was -1 on adding that many new files to the tree for performance reasons. I'd done a bit of research on Git performance, and it seemed to me that let me just kind of dig up on the first issue that I opened on this. That the number of files that we were adding was not going to necessarily cause major pain to get, although Refac did show a significant increase in startup time of his IDE indexing all those files. Myself, a number of people who were doing code and learns, and now Anna as well, have run into problems where the current setup that we have can leave stray files or random files changed because it's running npm install during the make command. So I was pushing that we should add these dependencies. Anna was +1 on that. We still have a -1 from Refac, who doesn't want to see this happen. This issue was opened 11 days ago, though, and I still have not received more examples about the performance detriments from adding these files. I do think that we can improve our dependency story. There's ways to do it, but we have previous art here with ESLint and our other dependencies where we've vendored everything. And it seems odd to me to have this as kind of a one-off, and we've hit a number of edge cases in making a one-off with it.
So I'm very much +1 on this, but that said, in retrospect, it might have been nice to consider maybe inviting Refac as an observer on this one, just to make the case. So we, and I wonder if it might be foolish to try to rope him in at this late time. Just throwing that out there.
Yeah, that might have been a good idea.
I just pinged him on IRC to see if he's there. Maybe he is. That would have been a good idea. You're right on that. I mean, worst case scenario on this, we can push it another week. Although now that we have we have awareness on it, so people can chime in. The biggest thing for me is this just keeps biting people, and it's not a small thing. This is in our contributor workflow.
When did Remark go in?
Remark went in almost a month ago now.
Okay. I just have even I've noticed more problems with funniness. So.
Yeah, and that's part of the reason why I wanted to push this through. I do recognize that adding 2,000 files to our tree is non-trivial. It's about an extra, I think 7 or 8% more files than we currently have in the entire tree. But this is affecting day-to-day workflow, and I'm not a fan of. Oh, Refac just said that he's listening. I'll message him.
You wouldn't happen to have the number that says, if we did add this, what the difference in total checkout time would be?
So I reviewed one article that was talking about Git performance, and it was stating that for file count, you usually don't run into problems until you're over hundreds of thousands of files. So we're at about 1,000. So we're still.
If we actually did a branch, committed it, and then checked it out, if we did something which was typical of what people have to do and the difference was negligible, that would be another good data point, right?
Yeah, I mean, there's no way, unfortunately, to check this into master and ever go back. And that's kind of why Refac was pushing back on this, was just we need to make a decision. But we've also had this for about a month, and I have not seen, we've seen 2 or 3 different possible ways of fixing this, which in turn just uncover other edge cases. And to me, I'm up for finding another way, but I think that we shouldn't block this in the meantime.
I think we should. So hold on. What are the problems with using npm? I'm not seeing them in this thread.
There are cases when you run make install where it will change files that are currently checked in, or create files that are not currently ignored, and they end up inside of the Git tree, and you end up having to either clean those files up or remove them, and this becomes especially confusing for individuals who, you know, are not super proficient with Git or are used to it day in and day out. Also, Anna ran into a problem when she was running 17.428 and linting wouldn't pass because npm install missed installing one particular dependency, and because npm install missed that dependency, it broke the whole test suite.
Yeah, it's even worse than that, which is that if you npm install, one of the things that gets npm installed is basically a configuration file. So you might have npm installed a configuration file from 3 months ago, but someone else, you know, with a fresh checkout will get a different configuration for your remark linting because, you know, you're getting a newer version. So stuff like that. And that's like it just causes weird, subtle differences in behavior for people that could be avoided by just checking the stuff in.
So, well, I mean, this sounds like it's actually really huge. Like we've been like hesitant on stuff in the past, but it was nowhere near like what 8% of our entire tree. Like, that's really big. So if I might, I would make a suggestion, which is to we do the installs in a separate Git repo, and then we either tag it or just go off the commits directly and just download basically a tarball and just unwrap a tarball in the directory we need it, so that we don't need to do an npm install, but we also don't need to check it into the tree. And then we have control over it, and we also have all the dependencies in like a historical way in case like anything happens to npm.
And so if we want to do that, Jeremiah, we should probably do that for the ESLint dependencies as well. And if that is the path that we want to take it, most likely what we should do is remove remark from our test suite right now until we have that set up. And that's the other option, but I have, you know, no one's created the pull request or moved that forward. So yeah, as Rich just mentioned, Raphael has removed his rejection. So Jeremiah, unless you want to object now, there's no objections on that pull request.
Could you clarify the size that it adds to the total Git tree? Is it 8% or 30% or 12%?
It's about 6% of the files, 6% extra files. We have something like 42,000 files that have to rerun the command line to figure out exactly how many it was. And it adds, here, if you give me 1 second, I can find it.
Look, markdown linting just doesn't matter that much. So I think we should pursue other options here first.
So my only pushback on that, Jeremiah, is this has been broken for a month, and there's been multiple calls for people to come up with another solution, and it hasn't happened. So the other option right now is removing the markdown linting, which is also an option, and moving this forward. But I'm not comfortable doing that unless someone wants to like say that they will lead the effort on actually doing this, because otherwise we're just blocking it.
Personally, this has caused enough headaches for me personally that I'm at the point where I would rather remove the markdown linting now, and have somebody pursue the downloading the tarball option that Jeremiah suggested, and have that be an optional piece.
Has there really been like a large case for markdown linting? Like, has there been stuff like really broken for any really long period of time? Like really broken? Like,
yeah, I've seen, for example, with the markdown, where conflict markers end up somehow getting in there in the markdown, and then we have broken markdown for months without noticing. And the docs
I could imagine it being useful for new contributors who often contribute in the documentation, giving them a better onboarding path and lint your markdown so that you're likely to have fewer objections when it goes in. I can imagine that being a case for it, but I don't know.
I don't see it as being something we have to run every time we run make Lance or make test. I can see it being a separate make target.
I think we should remove it for now, then.
So for exact numbers, we currently have 40,932 files in the tree. and from the time at which I originally made this, it's at 42,600. So it adds, you know, about 1,800 files, 1,700 files, which is the equivalent of about 4%. But yeah, I'm okay with closing this. Does someone want to take point on removing the linter then from the repo? Should we just like? There's been a whole bunch of changes to it, so it's a non-trivial task to go through and review and make sure everything's removed.
Or conversely, if someone wants to take the lead on the tarball idea that James, Colin, and Jeremiah endorsed.
I mean, ultimately, if we don't do this now, like this same thing's gonna bite us again in like 6 months, a year, whatever, when we try to add something else, right? It already bit us with ESLint. So since this is less important than ESLint, I think this would be a good place to take point on doing something like that.
I mean, should we open a Git issue asking for volunteers? I mean, I've seen like MacLover looking for automation, so he might. I'm just guessing he might jump in to help out, or there might be other people.
Refak just messaged me and said that he'll take it.
Okay.
So I'm going to close my pull request, and then I would like to see, maybe we should add this as a strategic initiative of improving the story for bundled dependencies.
That sounds like a good idea to me.
That sounds like a good idea to me too.
I think, like, also for what it's worth, and like we don't need to spend too much time on it, like I do think that we should be reviewing our dependency story as a whole, and I have ideas on how we could be improving V8. But I also think the way in which we handle tooling and node dependencies is going to be different than, you know, stuff like OpenSSL and V8. But, you know, I think we should kick off a strategic initiative around just our dependency management.
Yeah, I definitely agree. Just keeping on top of whether we have the right versions and all that is something that we should have more focus on. So yeah.
I would like to encourage us to wrap this up. We have several more items on the agenda.
Okay. Okay, any more discussion? People happy to move on. Okay, let's move on to 997, which is note that release config is removed after 6 months. I think, Rod, do you want to take that one? Rod, you may be on mute.
Sorry, yes. Sorry, which issue is this one?
It's 997. It's related to, you know, wanting to get rid of artifacts for version before version 4 in the build.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, we talked about this yesterday. Yeah, so basically, we've got a whole lot of just little snippets of code, particularly scattered through Jenkins, but also on the web server, that's still in place for us to be able to build and deploy Node 0.10, 0.12, and all of the IOJS versions. And build group wants to get rid of them all, so we just wanted to pass it by TSC to see if there's any objections to that. Basically, it would mean it'd be almost impossible to build any of those versions again using our infrastructure unless we put this stuff back in place. So it's letting go of some things. I think there's also a couple of servers that we still have around that used to build these versions that we don't need anymore. So this is, I guess, asking for permission from the TSC to scrap everything pre-4. That doesn't include, we'd still be able to edit and update the IOJS website. We just wouldn't be able to deploy test assets for pre-4.
Is all of the code artifacts and scripts and stuff, are they all contained in a repo?
No, they're scattered through Jenkins in the Jenkins scripts. It's like bash, little bits of bash that say if you know pre one, you know, if IOJS, all these sort of things.
Yeah, the only concern I would have is that is just maintaining the knowledge, right? So you know, how would we go about it, you know, on the extremely unlikely chance that we wanted to go build one of these old ones? Right. What would we need to know?
How much of that knowledge we've already lost already?
Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
It's been.
I mean, if it just comes down to, you know what, we're never going to do this, so it doesn't really matter, then that's fine.
If we were desperate, we could do it. But it'd be a pain either way. I mean, we're getting to the point now where it's become true croft. Like this is technical debt now. There's a lot of this stuff that we could really streamline without it.
Right, make it easier for people to understand what the job does, ramp up more quickly, that kind of stuff.
Yeah. Yeah, Jeremiah's saying it'd be nice to repoize. And there is additional discussion in build about opening up the configs for read-only access. What we could do is actually just check in particular versions of all the configs into the build repo, so we've got that history. It's not everything, but there's also some existing stuff on the server that is already in the build repo, and it just gets updated, Ansible scripts and stuff. So some of it is already in the repo, but we could do more.
And we're certainly already talking, you know, there's already a step that was taken, and people are looking at pipelines which would move more. So I think over time we're definitely moving in the direction that there will be more in repos.
Yeah.
But that won't be done for the 4.x, the pre 4.x stuff.
Yeah. So okay. So how about this then? Do we have any objections to doing this if we first capture whatever config we have now and store it somewhere in the repo in our repos?
That's you're talking about the Jenkins XML config,
yeah.
right?
Yeah. Okay. I'll jot that in that issue, and we'll get it done. It's going to be one of these tasks that it's just a slow cleanup. We'll find something and realize we have permission to remove that, so we'll get rid of it.
Sounds good.
Okay.
Okay, sounds like we can move on. We should, since we're don't have a ton of time. So Enterprise Advisory Group, this is issue 431. James, I believe you put it on the list.
Yeah, this is just for everyone's awareness. Basically, what this is a group of companies that have adopted Node. They're not necessarily contributing. They're not paying members of the foundation. They're significant users of Node. Organizing a group of them to be able to provide feedback through the community committee. There's the user feedback initiative that's happening over on that side, over on the community side. This fits in with that. I've been working with Disha on getting this organized. They had the first meeting last week. The entire intent is for it to that group's entire agenda to be driven by them, not by TSC members. So that's why I didn't really invite any other TSC members to that first meeting. I just wanted to kind of get things kicked off and then get some folks they're off and running, let them know what the process would be for getting chartered, and then go from there. The entire idea of this group, though, is to be able to provide feedback to the core project in terms of, how decisions are impacting them, what their priorities are, what their pain points are, whether or not we're actually meeting their requirements, that kind of thing. So the intention is for there to be a kind of a bidirectional communication channel between TSC and this group and others that are formed over on that side, over on the committee side, to basically say, let them know this is what we're doing, these are the issues we're looking at, this is what's going on. Give us feedback, gives us another channel for asking questions like, hey, we want to make this change or deprecate this API. How will this impact you? So we can get some more information other than just searching NPM modules.
Right.
And it also gives us a channel of getting feedback from a significant portion of our community. So,
I guess I'm wondering, I've been working with Dan in the community committee user feedback group, and one of the things that we're doing, and is we're going to pull a group of companies together to get feedback, and we were planning to organize regular interlocks with those companies. And we're reviewing the call for participation and stuff like that. I'm just wondering how we position that versus this effort.
I would work with Disha on that. Following the meeting last week, Dan was taking the to-do to figure out where this fits with existing user feedback and how to get this thing chartered. So I would sync up with him.
So when you say chartered, you see it as it's like I saw there was a separate repo created. So
it would either be its own working group or it would be a subgroup of the user feedback. That would be for this group to decide, and based on their communication with the community committee. I'm purposefully not being part of that process. So, it's on the agenda just to make all of you aware.
James, just a quick question for you. I think, just before I say anything, I want to say, I think this effort was really great, and it's really good to get more people in the room who we can talk with. My only concern that I have is setting proper expectations, since it's like a feedback committee, and individuals who are not active in the project may be showing up and asking, for the project to examine doing certain work or make requests for certain work to be done. What's being done to set proper expectations with that group right now?
The expectation with the group is that they understand that this is a feedback group, and that getting involved and getting involved is more of a, these are what our needs are, these are our pain points, these are the things that are a priority to us. Let us know if you're working on them. The companies that are involved in the discussion so far, you have Microsoft is there, Intel is there, Netflix, Todd Moore, IBM is there. These are folks that are around the Node community already, and they know how to get involved if they have specific, very specific work items. So,
I guess to maybe be a little bit more specific, generally when feedback is given, it's expected that the feedback is acted on. So how are you planning to, how do we,
the hope, of course, in participating with this is that the TSC is going to, someone on the core team is going to be paying attention to that and prioritizing the work. There's no expectation that it would be done. They're not making demands. They're just letting us know requirements.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
No, Miles, you asked a good question. This is William. We, in the user feedback group, that is a topic that we have pondered, and it has been brought up as most I can tell you. We have not solidified on what that messaging is and how that is, but we do identify that, it's important.
Yeah, just my biggest concern with that would be James, especially when you're talking about Intel or Microsoft or Google or stakeholders who are already heavily involved. I'm not really concerned about that. My concern would be a company who, this works as a good place for people to come in who maybe can't participate on GitHub for legal reasons or can't get involved, which is, one of the key reasons to have this. And just my concern would be people coming in and expressing feedback and then us not acting on it, and then people being even feeling further separated from the project than before. And so I would just like to, anyways, I was just expressing that concern, but it's not a reason to not do it, and it's not a reason to look negatively on anything. I think that this is really a good work and will be a great way for us to make informed decisions.
One thing that I think came out of the meeting the other day was basically we did a roundtable, and I'm going to say I sat there and listened the entire time. Went through a roundtable, everyone that was there, and basically did a top level of what their priorities and why they're looking to be involved. Every single thing that was mentioned was something that was already on our plates. already things that we're looking at, already things, like the stuff that Microsoft brought up is already stuff they're actively working on themselves within core. Likewise, some of the other folks, like Intel mentioned performance. Well, they already have people that are looking at the performance stuff and looking to make active contributions. So it's not just raising, hey, you guys go do this. It's, these are problems that we're all facing, and, just, cataloging what those priorities are. So.
Hey, James, is there any sense, and, I know this is just forming, and I don't know this, but I think that feedback from, these well-established, fantastic companies is good feedback for, like, the whole community to hear. So I'm wondering if this is a forum where they kind of need to have that feedback a little bit private, or if future meetings may have an intent of broadcasting.
I think there's going to be some combination of both. Like the minutes from the meeting the other day are posted in GitHub. Each of those things that was discussed in terms of priorities is there public. It's nothing that these individuals haven't talked about publicly before. There may be situations that come up, like we might want, we might be having a sensitive issue, like the kind of thing that happened last August, that we might want to engage a subset of the community and say, hey, what is the actual impact of this? And we might have to have more sensitive discussions, right? We just have to take that as a case-by-case basis. But what I expect is the majority of the conversation should be able to be public.
That was actually a good example of this. That if for those that are engaged in the security repo, I won't go into details, but the question about the ordering of releases, it would be good to have a forum of users to be able to ask those questions of.
Right.
Yeah, because we're all guessing.
Mm-hmm. James, one thing that I think would be really useful for me in all of this, and would be interested to hear if other TSC members agree, would be like an outline of what are going to be the success metrics of this user group, and specifically how those differ from the general user outreach that the community committee is giving. And I think that would kind of like help to align a little bit, how we as TSC members can better interact with them as well and make sure that it's successful.
Yeah, that's probably going to be a clearer picture of what those success metrics would be. It needs to be defined by this group. It needs to pretty much define it for itself. Its next meeting is later in January. Taking a break for the rest of December for the holiday. In the meantime, DSHA is supposed to be working up kind of like the basic plan for getting this thing chartered and associated, kind of more of an official thing under the community committee. So I would probably direct you to him for any conversations before that.
I also think people may appreciate some clarity on how to get involved, either as a TSC member or as an enterprise. And I'm assuming that would probably be part of the chartering process.
Yeah, that would be part of the chartering process. At this point, part of the whole mission of this is for it not, for the primary makeup of this group not to be TSC members. TSC members, participating in the conversation as part of the communication flow, yes, but not in terms of the agenda setting or defining what the priorities are. This is from the TSC's point of view. This should be a feedback channel, not a hey, let's go influence the discussion channel.
Mm-hmm.
As far as companies getting involved, just people raising their hand and saying, hey, I want to be involved with that, we'll get you connected to the to DSHA on the list of participants.
So, do you think that it makes more sense for there to be one or two TSC members who are constantly going to these meetings and acting as an intermediary? Or do you think there would be benefit in us cycling who those are so this committee can get to meet the whole, so this group can meet the whole committee?
I think that remains to be seen. I was not going to volunteer anybody else to do it. So, I'm more than willing to be a liaison to this group informally. If there are other TSC members that are interested in participating with that role, then we can cycle through. But setting this up, I wasn't going to assume that that other TSC members would want to be involved, because I'm not going to volunteer their time.
Yeah, I'll talk to Dan, because I'd already been, as part of my work in the community committee, I was involved in the user feedback side where we're going to go out and ask companies to get involved, and so I'll ask him how he thinks I might get involved or should be involved in that.
Yep. Michael, I would just, Todd was on the call, so we might sync up with him, and Miles would just say, Sarah was also there, so sync up with her.
Yeah, I just, I'm, if I'm putting out a call for companies to participate in an effort we were organizing, I just think being involved in this might help me be able to understand what the difference is and how to position it. And anyway,
right.
Talk to Dan. It sounds like you're saying Dan's going to move this forward. I'd asked him about it before, and he didn't have too many of the details, but I'll go back to him and discuss it with him. It sounds like.
Well, there aren't too many concrete details, because this group, part of my whole goal in kind of talking and working on organizing this group was for it to define its own goals and agenda. So I didn't want to lead the conversation with too much pre-established ideas of how it should be organized and what it should do and that kind of thing. My whole effort here has just been to get the people on the same call talking to one another, and then go from there. So there are still many details that need to be worked out.
As Rich mentioned, we're out of time. We have 2 more agenda items, so maybe we should wrap this one up.
Yep, let's move on. I'd suggest we move on to the V8 JIP scaffolding responsibility handoff.
Yeah, I brought that one up too. Sorry for making the agenda so huge. I just wanted to bring this back on everyone's radar. This is likely something that will be happening in Q1 of 2018. So we need to start figuring that out. The V8 team is willing to work with us on it. Just wanted to make sure that we were aware of this. This is something that could be coming in 6.5.
So effectively, that means that the scaffolding for V8, the JIP scaffolding in V8 will go away, and we'll have to take that over, or support for JIP is ending, which is
Yeah, so it would be that the scaffolding for JIP will be deprecated out of the repo because they maintain it right now, whereas the GN scaffolding is inside of the larger Chromium repo and not checked into V8 itself. So the simplest thing would literally be us beginning to check that scaffolding into our tree. Alternatively, I know that there's I believe that there's some work going on and seeing if we can get Node built with GN. Either way, just wanted to make sure it's on everyone's radar.
Can I chime in here?
Yes,
we are working on building Node with GN. We will not turn this off before we got it working. Otherwise, our commit bots wouldn't let it through. So there will definitely be an option to build Node with GN, but maybe it's not going to work on all operating systems that Node supports.
I know Ben is tinkering with, he's got a branch that's doing CMake building, so that might be worth looking at if anyone's interested in this question.
Oh, cool.
Now, I'm not sure if CMake would cover all the dependencies, but anyway, I don't want to talk about it.
We can make it do like we do with JIP now anyway. Like most of our dependencies, well, a few of our dependencies don't do JIP, and so we make our own JIP files for them.
So possibly we should kick this off as its own strategic initiative, and likely we should maybe have a meeting outside of the TSC to get stakeholders together to come up with a game plan. I'll take the action item on that.
Great, and I'll go ahead and remove the TSC agenda label from that issue.
Thank you.
Okay, great, done. And you'll take the action item. Groovy.
So given that we're 2 minutes over time, do we want to, the last issue is the strategic initiatives review. Since we do that at each meeting, we can either decide to run late and do that, or decide to defer it to a future meeting where maybe we don't have as much content. What do people think?
How about we ask that it be done in the document before the next meeting? Like documents created, the minutes document, and then people can please update, before the meeting.
Yeah, you're saying basically in the strategic document. Yeah, okay, that's not a bad idea. So at least we have some update there that we can read if we don't have time to cover it. And for people, we don't always have everybody there. That does sound like a good idea. Any objection to that? Okay, it doesn't sound like it, so I'm going to put that as the minutes for the underneath there. Going to skip.
Just one clarification. Where would you want those notes put?
In the minutes for the TSC meeting.
For today?
So there will be, that the Google Docs created. There's actually an entry that says, strategic initiatives under agenda. If we fill it in there.
Actually, we can do it next week, but sure, we can do it this week.
Can I say that again?
I actually meant do it in the document for next week's meeting, but we can do it in this week's meeting. That's fine too. Yeah, either way.
I was thinking we'd ask that people do that in advance for every meeting. Does that make sense?
That's fine.
Yeah, I think we should do it every meeting in the docs.
Okay.
And then if people want to talk about anything, when the meeting happens, then great. But if not, there's time. There's the information that's there, and everybody can see it.
Okay, yeah, that makes sense to me. So basically, I've taken those notes. I guess we can then move on to questions. Anybody who has questions, if you can put them into, I guess, either the issue itself, IRC chat, or the YouTube comments. I think you can see those, right, Jeremiah?
Yes.
A couple minutes.
Someone has a note for you. Apparently mentioned build issue 997 at some point, but it was not mentioned in the Google Doc. Not sure what that is.
It is in the Google Doc. It was in the wrong section, and I moved it. I've updated the Google Doc. Let me just confirm that it's build request 997, and it now has its own section for Node.js build. Yeah.
Yeah, I probably did that because I had to manually add that. So.
Yeah, just copy. Sure.
I haven't seen any questions in IRC. In the issue itself, where is that?
No, nothing's shown up in the issue either.
Okay, so I think at this point we can say there's no questions, and thank you for everybody attending this week. And next week, I think Francisco will be chairing at 7 a.m. Eastern. What time is that? That's back in the book calendar. It is going to be next week at, sorry, I got to open it to get the actual, get it to show me the UTC time. And it is 12 p.m. UTC. Okay, see everybody then.